What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Dee's Spot. This is the spot for all things empowerment through yoga, meditation, and psychoeducation. My name is Dalia, and I am your guide. Now, I know a lot of us have been experiencing a myriad of emotions from anger to grieving with everything that's happening in Palestine, namely the genocide and war that is taking place. And so I've done an episode on sacred anger, an episode on how to process grief and secondary grief. And I thought this would be an opportune time to talk to you about post-traumatic growth. I can fully appreciate that this is a really traumatizing time for us experiencing and watching the news, just experiencing it from a safe distance. I can't even begin to imagine how traumatic it is for people on ground being killed and murdered and losing their families around them. It is so traumatic. And if we can offer even a sliver of hope that through something so monstrous and so hideous and heinous, that maybe we can come out of it stronger, wiser, more empathetic, more well-rounded, that we can use something so horrible as a catalyst for growth, gives me a little bit of hope. And that's why I want to talk to you about post-traumatic growth, what it is, how to achieve it in your life. So I'm going to also talk to you about what trauma is and how it works. And at the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you a somatic experiencing exercise that helps you physically begin to process that trauma. So first things first, what is PTG, or post-traumatic growth? I know a lot of people are familiar with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but post-traumatic growth is when an individual, like I said, comes out of a traumatic experience stronger, wiser, more empathetic, better than they were before. It's using that trauma as a catalyst, as a transformative experience, an opportunity to grow and to be better. Now, before I move on to how we can invite more PTG into our lives, let's take a look at what trauma is first and what secondary trauma is. Now, trauma, it refers to an overwhelming emotional response to a distressing or disturbing event. It's a very simplified way, but basically trauma is trauma when it overwhelms a person's ability to cope or person's ability to deal. Trauma is something that leaves long-lasting emotional scars, and science has found that it literally rewires the brain. And so it's important to note that trauma is not just, what happened because of an event. Trauma is also based on how we perceive what happened, and it can really affect our sense of safety, security, trust, and self-worth. Now, as I also mentioned, secondary trauma, also known as vicarious trauma, can occur when individuals are just witnessing or are exposed to the trauma, the suffering, and the pain of others. And it's really important to note that obviously secondary trauma stems from a place of compassion. It stems from a place of empathy, and that's a beautiful thing. Our ability to feel for others, to put ourselves not just in the shoes of another person, but to really allow ourselves to be open to what they must be feeling. And that can be traumatic. And so learning how to recognize and how to address the emotions that come up, especially things like helplessness and powerlessness, because it allows us to utilize our strengths, to utilize our resilience and our resources to make a difference through our actions and through how we choose to be of service. Now, what happens when a person experiences trauma? What happens is that their body's natural response is to release a surge of energy, right? This activates the fight-flight response. And this surge of energy prepares your body to literally respond to that threat. So it gets you ready to fight, to run away, or you freeze. Now, this energy, unless it's expelled, can be trapped or stuck in the nervous system. Say, for example, we are literally watching people being bombed, innocent civilians and children being bombed every day. And we are literally seeing this from the safety of our own homes, and we're watching this happen. Now, your brain, which doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not real, interprets and perceives the situation that you are in danger. And so your body constricts. Your nervous system, it starts releasing adrenaline and cortisol, and your body's getting ready for the fight or flight. But really, you're just watching it on your phone. There's nothing for you to run away from or to fight. And so what happens is that energy gets stuck in your body, and it causes a lot of hypervigilance, which is why traumatized people are always hyper aware, because their body is physiologically always signaling to them that they are in danger, even though maybe they are realistically not. So let's take a bit of a deeper look on this cycle. You can think of it as a series of phases or events that happen. First thing is the triggering event, right? So this begins with something that could be the original source of trauma, or it could be something that is a reminder of the original trauma. For many of us Arabs who are watching what's happening in Palestine, we have our own experiences with war. I mean, I don't know about you. I was literally in Lebanon during the 2006 war with Israel. So I know firsthand the trauma of war, and just watching what's happening in Palestine now is going to be triggering a lot of that 2006 war for me personally. And then in the second stage, we have the hyperarousal. So in response to the trigger, your body enters a state of hyperarousal. Again, it gets you ready for fight, flight, and freeze. It does this by increasing your heart rate. Your breathing becomes rapid and more shallow. Your muscles are tensing. You have this heightened alertness. But are you actually in danger? A lot of times, no. But that's just the impact of trauma on your body. And then you have the third phase of the cycle, which is dissociation. This is the freeze response. So if a person who's experiencing trauma is unable to effectively respond to the threat, for example, if fighting or fleeing is not possible, like for many of us watching today, then they might enter a state of dissociation or freeze. And I know I hear a lot of people as well talking about how I can barely get through the day. I'm not productive. I'm unable to focus. That's because your nervous system is stuck in a freeze state. This is a survival mechanism where your body and mind disconnect as a way to cope with overwhelming stress. And then we move into the fourth stage, and this is the incomplete discharge of incomplete discharge of energy. So in situations where fight and flight is not possible, the surge of energy that's generated by the body during this time remains trapped, and it has nowhere to go. And that's going to just cause us to constantly feel anxious or on edge. And that's where it leads to the fifth stage, which is hypervigilance. That trapped energy causes that person to stay in a state of high alert. It's like you're always expecting another threat to happen. And so in this state of constant alertness, it can be freaking exhausting for people to be in that state, which is why stage 6, what a lot of people end up doing is experiencing avoidance. So to cope with the hyperarousal and to cope with the physiological symptoms that come with it, people can start avoiding situations, places, or people that remind them of the trauma or that is familiar to that trauma at all. And while that may provide some kind of temporary relief, it kind of reinforces the trauma cycle by preventing them from actually completing the response. And how do we complete the response? By exerting that energy that got all surged up and had nowhere to go. And at the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you an exercise that's going to help you to literally release that pent up energy, because that's where healing can happen, and that's where breaking the trauma cycle can happen. It can only happen if we find a healthy way to discharge the trapped energy and to complete the body's natural response to threat. I just want to take a second here and acknowledge a lot of therapeutic frameworks that are in place to help people deal with trauma. And you can have things like somatic experiencing, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and processing therapy. You have trauma-focused yoga, for example, and these are all ways that are helping people to physically release energy and release trauma in a safe and controlled manner. But the one thing that all these different modalities have in common is that they focus on getting you grounded, on establishing some body awareness, because when we experience trauma, we live outside of our body so long. So it's coming back to the body, breathing with the body, and allowing the nervous system to return to a state of equilibrium. And so the good news is that when we do process the trauma, when we do move past the cycle and allow our body to go back to equilibrium, then post-traumatic growth is possible. And not only is it possible, but post-traumatic growth can have a lot of amazing positive effects on your life. For example, science has shown that people who experience post-traumatic growth experience an increase in their personal strength. They discover their inner reservoir of resilience. They acknowledge that they have strengths that they can work with that are going to help them endure and overcome not just this, but if you can get through this, anything. A second positive outcome from PTG is a newfound appreciation for life. And after the war in Lebanon, not a day goes by that I'm not grateful that I'm still alive, that I'm still here. And while I'm alive, I'm going to use my voice in whatever way I can to make a difference. Another positive outcome is improved relationships, because you're able to develop a deeper connection when your sense of empathy, when your sense of compassion is heightened. Another positive outcome is embracing new possibilities. It's really understanding that and exploring these uncharted paths, understanding that you have the tools to walk the unknown path, to change, to foster your creativity, to embrace all these new beginnings, new ways that you can move forward in life in spite of that trauma. And finally, many have experienced spiritual growth as well. And I don't just mean this from a religious perspective, but also from a, how do we create more meaning in our lives? How do we connect with a higher purpose? How do we find peace in the day-to-day? So those are all the positive outcomes that are possible after experiencing trauma. But the question is, how can we embody or bring in more PTG into our lives? So I'm going to guide you through a process inspired by Nelson's post-traumatic growth path. So PTGP. And this is a powerful framework that's really proven effective to help various trauma survivors. And it's very simple. It has 4 stages: deal, feel, heal, and seal. I'm going to take you through each one of these stages, but again, in a nutshell, it's deal, feel, heal, and seal. So stage number 1 is to deal. And this involves writing your trauma narrative. Now, in my previous video on processing grief, I talked about narrative therapy, and I guided you through the different phases and steps of narrative therapy. And this is kind of similar to that, but it involves literally just grabbing a pen and paper and writing down the raw facts of the experience. So who, what, where, when. Just like writing down what happened. Then we can dive deeper into our emotions, exploring the emotions, thoughts, and feelings that arose because of what happened. So when we acknowledge them, when we can just get them out on paper, we can begin to deal with it, because we can't deal with what we can't feel. And that's the second stage, feeling. And this is kind of like an embracing an imaginary, tongue twister, imaginal exposure. So in the feel stage, we kind of confront our emotions. So we can read the narrative aloud. So what we wrote in the first stage of deal, we can read that aloud and not just allow ourselves to go back to that place. If it feels safe, please, if it feels safe to do this, you do this. Otherwise, as always, have a mental health professional with you to guide you through these stages. But when we read what happened aloud, we kind of allow our brain to re-experience what had happened. And it also, when we do this, we need to allow the emotions to surface, because it's going to be bringing up a lot of emotions. Again, your brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening, what's not happening, what's real, what's not. So when you go there, your brain is going to be bringing up all these emotions. So use this as an opportunity to imagine the experience in your mind's eye, use vivid imagery. And this imaginal, why can't I say the word imaginal? The imaginal exposure reconnects you to your original emotions. And by allowing yourself to feel them, by allowing yourself to validate those emotions, by allowing yourself to deconstruct certain thoughts about those emotions, then you can begin to heal, which brings us to the third phase, which is channeling that post-traumatic growth by healing. So there's three transformational phases, I guess, that you can embody or lean on in this phase. And the first is freedom of choice. So recognizing your power. You didn't choose the trauma, but you can choose your path now. So when you rewrite your story, you can choose the ending that you would like for yourself. Again, we talked about this in narrative therapy in the previous video, but this is about how you can rewrite your ending. Your story is in your hands. Remember, you are an active author. You're not just a passive character. So the second phase of healing is to find meaning, finding meaning in that experience. So reflecting on the lessons that we learned, the strength that we gained. And every one of us have our own unique skills, our own unique strengths, our own unique resilience that help us through these times. So what was yours? Find meaning, find strength in the experience that you went through. And the third healing phase is embracing the hero archetype. So embracing your inner hero, right? Like your story, like a hero's journey, can inspire others. You have a challenge, you have a difficulty, you thought you weren't going to make it, but then you did. So connecting your experience to a cultural storytelling, a valuable archetype, like a hero's archetype, can really help you to make sure that you are the star of your narrative. And finally, stage 4, sealing. It's about making peace with the past and knowing that you're no longer going to allow trauma to define you. So in this phase, you are letting go of what's happening, but you are sealing in this new renewed sense of purpose, reconnecting with life, embracing new opportunities, developing skills to help you move forward and prevent relapse, to help you maintain your emotional well-being. So those are the 4 stages, right, to how you can enhance post-traumatic growth. You deal by writing things down, getting your thoughts, your feelings out on paper, feel, allowing yourself to feel your feelings and validating those feelings. But also, I really want to state here, it's very important to note that a lot of trauma survivors tend to internalize the trauma, thinking that it was their fault, that something is wrong with them, and they kind of get engulfed in this cycle of shame. And that is, shame goes hand in hand with trauma. And it's actually just the saddest thing, because trauma is difficult enough without us judging ourselves for how we survived that trauma. So just taking a second and acknowledging that whatever means that you survived the trauma, you survived the trauma. Now you can help yourself by adopting healthier coping skills, that you did what you could back then with the resources you had. So let's drop the judgment. Let's be mindful when we are noticing that we're experiencing things like shame, like blame, like judgment, that we can intervene with more acts of self-compassion, self-kindness. How do you talk to yourself in those moments are what's going to set you up for long-term healing. So deal, feel, which brings us to heal, and remembering that to heal, you have a choice. You can choose how you're going to respond. You can find meaning in what happened, and you can rewrite your narrative to make yourself the hero of your story by embracing your hero's archetype. And finally, you seal. So we kind of process that trauma, we seal and hold on to the good things that came out of it, the strengths, the virtues, the values that we were able to take from this, and we seal that in. And so those are the 4 stages. But please note that, again, healing is not linear. Like I said in my grieving process, these phases can overlap or they can repeat. Just know that healing from trauma is an extremely complex and individual process, because every person will go through it differently and in their own unique way. And trauma isn't one of those things that I would say, go do the work yourself. Trauma is something that we heal best through community, so support groups, but also by leaning on a mental health professional, a therapist. It can really facilitate your healing journey by giving you professional guidance and the tools tailored to your individual needs and experiences, and to help you with that process. Whew, all right, so now we talked about trauma, how trauma, the cycle of trauma, how we get trapped in hypervigilance, and then we talked about how to improve post-traumatic growth and how to invite more post-traumatic growth in our lives. But now I want to end it by talking to you a little bit about shaking. Now, before I get into shaking, let's go back to the National Geographic. So I'm sure you've seen on these like predator versus prey type shows, let's say we have a lion that is running after a gazelle, and that gazelle is fight, flight, like the nervous system, it's like fight, flight, freeze. That gazelle is fleeing. So all its energy gets pent up and it starts run, 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 run. Now, it's running away from the lion, but the lion is gaining on it. And right before the lion is about to pounce and make its move to attack the gazelle, it's almost like the gazelle's subconscious mind registers the attack before it happens. And suddenly the gazelle plays dead. But actually, play dead is the freeze response. And that is its brain's way of protecting it from feeling the pain. So it dissociates the poor gazelle from the fact that it's about to get ripped to shreds by this lion. Now, sometimes what you'll see happen is the lioness wants to teach its cubs how to also hunt. So it'll drag the gazelle back to its den or whatever, but it won't kill it right then and there. So the lion goes away, the lioness goes away to like find its cubs. And in the meantime, the gazelle gets up, and what is the first thing that you see it do? Starts to shake. It shakes it up, and then like nothing happened, it's on with its day. And that's because shaking is a natural and instinctual response that helps the body release stored tension and stress. That's the difference between animals and humans. That gazelle did not get caught up in some kind of narrative about, oh, this is my fault and I should be ashamed of myself. I blame myself for this lioness catching me or whatever. No, that allows its body to release and complete the cycle by processing that trauma through shaking. And this is called, and I want to now guide you for how you can do this trauma release exercise, TRE, trauma release exercise, safely and effectively. And the first thing you want to do is find a safe space. So find somewhere quiet, somewhere private, where you're not going to be all worried about people seeing you and judging you or whatever. Just make sure that you're not going to be interrupted during the process. Step number 2, get in a comfortable position. The most grounding position is to stand with your feet shoulder width apart, firmly planted on the ground. You can also do this lying down, by the way, with your toes pointing up and you're on your heels. And you can also do it sitting down if you're unable to get up or lie down. Now, the third step is to close your eyes only if it feels safe. For a lot of trauma survivors, closing their eyes does not feel safe. And so if it doesn't, just a gentle gaze to the tip of your nose can help you focus inwards and enhance your awareness of your body sensations. Because that is the point of this exercise, is to connect ourselves with the physiological sensations that we are experiencing in our bodies. Now, step number 4 is to just relax the muscles. So taking a few deep breaths, relax the body, get loose, shake, like just let go of any tension in your muscles. Just focus on getting relaxed and loose. And then in the 5th stage, we're just going to start with a gentle trembling. All right. Maybe we just start shaking the hands. Maybe we shake the arms. Maybe we add the legs in. Don't force it. The most important thing here is to allow the shaking to happen spontaneously. So your body might start with small tremors and then grow. Your body might just do tremors. Maybe your body is just doing the shaking. Don't be scared. A lot of people get scared because their body's taking over and it feels like they have to relinquish control. But whatever happens, just know that it's okay. Now, avoid controlling the shaking consciously, right? You're not trying to control what's happening here. Instead, use this as an opportunity to surrender to your body's natural rhythm. Your body is so intelligent. It knows exactly what it needs to do. You just need to have faith and allow it to do its thing. Step number 6, all you got to do is focus on your breathing. So breathe naturally, okay? And just keep your awareness to pay attention on your breath. Again, you're not going to try to control your breathing. Just let it follow its own pace. So sometimes when we're shaking, it might get deeper or it might be quicker. It might be more shallow. Whatever it is, it's the right response. You are just going to be aware of it. And finally, you're going to allow this emotional release. So shaking can sometimes be accompanied by emotions or memories surfacing. So if you find that you are feeling that shame or feeling that guilt, just allow those emotions to come up without judging them. If you feel like crying, cry. If you feel like shouting, shout. If you feel like cussing and expressing yourself verbally, go ahead. Allow it to happen in a safe and controlled manner. Now, the most important thing as you do this is to trust the process. Trust in your body's innate wisdom. Shaking is a natural mechanism for releasing stress. So allow the shaking to continue as long as feels comfortable. Your body will naturally slow down and stop when it's ready. Now, those are the phases for how to get through the shaking and how to practice shaking in your own environment. But it's also important what happens after the shaking. So when your body has naturally slowed down and stopped, take a few moments to breathe and ground yourself. So important that you ground yourself. So maybe you can, again, just plant your feet on the floor, visualize roots growing from the soles of your feet, anchoring you to the core of Mother Earth. Notice how your body feels in this moment. Some people start to immediately feel lighter, more relaxed, or just emotionally relieved after shaking. Maybe you can whip out that journal that I was talking about and write down your experience. What thoughts came up? What emotions came up? and use it as an opportunity to get to know yourself. And of course, taking it easy, taking a warm bath, drinking a lot of water, herbal teas, simply just resting afterwards is important because, yes, we're all about doing the work, but we also need to integrate. So, shaking is a way to bring up all these things, and integrating is a great way to let your nervous system come back to homeostasis. So I know that was a lot. We talked about trauma, secondary trauma, post-traumatic growth, and how shaking can help you process that trauma. I hope that you found this episode helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what else you'd like to learn about, what you might find most valuable for you during this traumatic time. Just know that, as always, I am here for you, sending you all the love and healing in the world.